Good morning, America. Thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy. They're live or on rebroadcast. We've got an interesting show. We've had a lot of interesting changes lately, and we're going to focus today. The topic of the day is going to be dealing with these new changes going on in the IRS. The IRS just came out with some announcements, some good announcements about changes to their online policy, but unfortunately, they're getting harder to deal with than ever if you're trying to get your case resolved, if you're trying to do anything but a simple installment agreement and pay your balance in full, they've really made customer service atrocious. And so we're going to talk about the problems and how to deal with those in today's episode. So stay tuned, and we're also going to be focusing on what are Kamala Harris's tax proposals, as again, that's one of the new topics facing us today. Welcome back, everybody, and thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy. We've got some interesting news, and for most of the news section, I want to focus on some of the proposals and ideas from the Kamala Harris camp. So, again, it's just Wednesday, so we have to understand that she hasn't had time to flesh out her staff, figure out what's going on. They have all kinds of things to figure out, so to be fair to Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, she's got a full plate right now. But I think it is helpful to look at current positions and also her prior policy decisions to get an idea of what to expect from an Harris administration, which I think is important as we try to talk about the issues and how that will impact the bottom line, for our average taxpayers. And so, again, will it help or will it hurt? And how much? So, just starting off, first article we're going to cover today, I've got a couple of news articles to get out of the way. And this has been brewing. I've touched on this, but this is really, in this article is from the Epic Times. Here's Senator Blumenthal. This is a bipartisan thing. So, Republicans and Democrats are calling out Zelle and the three major banks behind it, which is B of A, JP Morgan Chase, and Wells Fargo. So these are the principal owners of Zelle. Zelle can be very handy, but you have to be very, very careful with Zelle payments. The reason why, they're instantaneous. Once the payments are done, they're essentially over, and you can't really pull that money back. So people who fell victim to scams aren't being reimbursed by the financial institutions. The vast majority aren't. So 9 out of 10 customers who disputed a transaction as a scam weren't reimbursed. And we know scams are getting worse every year. Some of them, again, it's become very pervasive. I just had someone say that they were scammed by a scamming organization based out of Cambodia. And Cambodia might be following China's lead. China has been funding scams and actively targeting American individuals to rip them off. So again, a lot of them originate out of China. If other countries with undemocratic countries that are looking for a quick way to make a buck, legal or illegal, there's plenty of countries out there willing to do that, which again, it's frustrating for Americans that aren't used to being tricked every which way you go. So again, prime example, a college student Zelled over $2,400 when she thought she was hired for a summer job with a professor. And 94-year-old woman who was targeted by scam artists who had personal information about her brother, and they used that identity theft to convince her and her family that he'd been arrested and urgently needed bail money. So anytime you have an emergency like that, they're going to try to push you to make a knee-jerk reaction. They're going to push you to, you have to do this now, send the money now. If someone wants you to pay money for a job, 99 times out of 100, it's going to be a scam. So part of this, and this is why I talk about these scams so much, it's to inform people. So what's happening out there? So if you or family member gets hit with a scam, they can call and get help, and you can help inform them. So if you're not talking about this, especially with anybody older that you know, these are the scams, and they're targeting the elderly or the very young that don't know better yet. So, and the speed of the payment is what appeals to fraudsters, and the fact that very few of these are being pursued and investigated. Why aren't they? So these are generally instant and irreversible, peer-to-peer payments, and by the time the consumer realizes it's a scam, their money's gone. So Blumenthal and others, again, this is bipartisan, is saying that, again, this is a huge thing affecting taxpayers. And the hard part is that the average losses are $500. The big banks have very little incentive to go and investigate $500. By the time they put in a couple hours, they've spent more than it's worth to just go and reimburse it. But the problem is they're not reimbursing it. They're just telling their people, look, it's a small claim, it's not worth our time. But that does help. That does hurt average Americans in every day. So he compares it to a car seat. And it's like we would never allow something that 90% of the time fail. Oh, we never tolerate a car that protects infants 99% of the time, or an airplane that succeeds 99% of the time. Because that 1% gets hurt really bad. So if someone goes through their banks, they're required to reimburse clients when they lose their money through unauthorized transactions. The problem is people are authorizing this, but 2 out of 3 customers are explaining that they were defrauded without their authorization, approval, or consent, or were denied reimbursement. That's the trick. Denied reimbursement. So be very wary when using Zelle. Make sure it's to people you know, you trust. I gotta be aware that they're not reimbursing most of these payments. And so again, I don't know what they would do to address this, besides passing, some kind of law making the banks liable for fraud. But again, it becomes more tedious. But no matter what is happening out there, protect yourselves. Make sure your family members are educated, or at least know to call you or another family member if they do suspect it, or if there is an emergency like that, and say, look, bring me on, let me talk to them. Don't just give them a credit card or Zelle right away. Take a step back and consider, is this really, is this a real thing? So next article, this is from townhall.com, written by Katie Pavlich. So they brought in the FBI director on the border because, again, essentially the border is wide open. I mean, people are just walking across and they're all being brought in. We're flying people into the country that are here coming in illegally. And one of the House Judiciary Committee, controlled by Republicans, is saying this is a huge problem, especially in the aftermath of the attempted assassination of former President Trump. That we're letting people in here who don't know who they are, not really vetting them. So Director Wray of the FBI agrees. He's like, some of his comments, I've been saying for some time that we're living in an elevated threat environment. And Butler County's attempted assassination is just another example of this. He said, I've warned for some time about the threat that foreign terrorists may seek to exploit our southwest border or the point of entry. So it's like, It's like, that's not our job. It's not in the FBI's lane. But they've been working more and more with other partners in law enforcement to try to find and stop foreign terrorists coming across our borders. So again, it does cause a lot of concern, and we know plenty of people have come out and talked about the dangers of the border, but again, it's flies in the face of what's the current policy of the administration, of the Biden administration. So again, the question is, who was in charge? And now and to be fair, the right is trying to lay it all at Kamala Harris's lap. She was labeled in terms of the borders are, but at the same time, how much power did she really have, or does she agree with Biden's policies, or would she go further? So when you talk about the border policy, this is why it's very important to know what people's stances are, know what their policies are. And in general, in 2019, when Kamala Harris was running for president, in one of the debates they asked who thinks it should not be a crime to come to the United States illegally, that we should get rid of that crime. People should be able to come across and just, whatever numbers and just come across the border. Kamala Harris, among the other she wasn't the only one, but she was with the first group trying to raise her hand as quickly as possible to say it shouldn't even be a crime to cross the border illegally. So any other country, there's no other country in the world that would do that. Only in the United States do we have such a porous border where we don't care how many people come across. But again, the question is that good? A good thing for our economy, and how does that affect things? So moving on to the next article, and this is something that we're going to discuss in depth over the next probably couple months until the election. I want to jump to another article. This one is about Hunter Biden, and when we're talking about tax indictments, a lot of people have questions about this. Do I have to worry about this? Again, main reason I'm sharing this because this is a classic example of what not to do. This is how you end up in this situation. I don't know if Hunter Biden is just getting horrible advice from his attorneys leading up to this, or if Hunter Biden is telling his attorneys what to do. But they're being forced into a situation where either they need to stop lying, and it's pretty blatant at this point, or resign from the case. And that's going to be their ethical responsibility to resign from the case very shortly, or they're about to get hammered by the judge. So we're running out of time, coming up on our next commercial break, so we're going to continue this. But when you're dealing with the IRS, and especially the government, frankness and honesty is your best policy. Does it mean that you disclose everything before the question's asked? No. But there's definitely a line that, when push comes to shove, yeah, you need to be honest and forthright with the government. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to Taxes Made Easy. And some people are probably saying, whoa, what did he just say right before the break? So I want to explain myself a little bit. Ethically, as an attorney, making misrepresentations to the IRS and the government is cause for massive concern. And in this case, the judge issued a stern rebuke to Hunter Biden's lawyers for making false statements and threatened them with sanctions. So again, pretty strict thing here. But for example, if I call the IRS and I'm going through somebody's financial statement and the IRS fails to ask about something, or if they miss something that isn't in my client's favor, is it my responsibility to point out their mistakes and highlight the worst part of my client's cases to them? Absolutely not. When I'm in negotiations, I give people, the honest assessment and give them a full picture of what's going on. But when we submit documents to the IRS, they're signing this on their penalty of perjury. We'll make sure it's fully and completely done. But if they skip over something, especially when we're doing an offer and compromise, sometimes they miss issues. Do I highlight that for the IRS and say, oh, well, you should focus on? No, of course not. There's not a defense attorney or representative in the United States that is required to highlight the mistakes of their clients or in the bad parts of their case. Now, there are some times, especially when you're dealing with a court case, you want to be forthright, especially with the judge, highlight the good and the bad. In this case, the judge called him out for making false statements in their recent motion to throw out his federal tax indictment. Probably not going to happen. And he really dinged them for misrepresenting the history of the case. And he gave them 1 week to explain themselves or potentially face sanctions like professional disciplinary proceedings or monetary fines. This is how you get in trouble with the IRS. This is how you get in trouble generally in dealing with audits, is when you make misrepresentations or lie about certain things. And I have fired clients on more than one occasion because they would not be straight and honest and present reasonable numbers to the IRS. So an example of something I didn't highlight is, I had a client once, we're in the middle of an audit, and she had a huge charitable contribution that probably shouldn't have been a charitable contribution. It was she made this contribution because her son had messed up and damaged school property, and she paid for it. That's not a charitable contribution. The school didn't contest it, but at the same time, if the auditor would have dug into it, I would not have contested it. The auditor never dug into it, never questioned it. So it wasn't my job to do the auditor's job for them and highlight the weakness. We were trying to find some middle ground anyway, and not scrutinize the case. The auditor didn't want to scrutinize the case and go to depth. The client really didn't want that, so we were trying to make a deal on the case anyway. But when you make false statements, that's what really, and it's discovered, that's what really sets people off. That's what really causes problems. And Hunter Biden has a history of that. So lied on his tax returns, hid money, hid assets, foreign accounts, shell accounts, did everything to hide it. So when you're acting like a criminal, you might get treated like one. And that goes for everyday taxpayers as well. That's how you get criminal penalties and charges filed against you. So again, I can't emphasize this enough. Trying to hide the ball, trying to hide facts from the IRS. I will not lie to anybody, to the IRS, because it's not worth my bar license. There's not a single case out there that's worth that. in my professional career. So again, some of the things that he's threatening is professional disciplinary proceedings or monetary fines directly against the attorneys. Again, not worth it. So again, they claim that no charges were brought against him, whereas charges actually were. And that was just one example from the misstatements were not trivial, and he has little tolerance for lack of candor. So that means lying. I just want to highlight that this is why Hunter's in so much trouble. And I see taxpayers that get into plenty of trouble because they're not straightforward and honest with the IRS. And sometimes, they're not straightforward and honest with me as their attorney. One of the worst things you can do is hire someone to represent you and not be straightforward and honest with them. So again, it's crazy. So honesty really is the best policy, especially with your attorney, and then your attorney can craft the case to either minimize the bad facts or kind of leave it on them to ask about certain things. But again, you can't just leave things off when you're reporting, when you're filling out financial forms, etc. That can lead to serious issues if you do so. I'm going to share another article. This is something I think I might have mentioned, but Union Station was mobbed, essentially. They were burning flags. They were threatening people. They burned Prime Minister Netanyahu in effigy during his when he was visiting the United States yesterday, or in the last couple days. So it's pretty scary. And again, some people were arrested. Did the police really crack down on the mob? No. And so there were some members of Congress with some Navy vets, Marine vets. They got together and raised the flags again, as it should be. So again, violent pro-Hamas, terrorist sympathizing zealots desecrated and removed their flags near the Capitol. And so it's at Union Station in Washington, D.C. Scary times, and I think it's important to be aware of proper ways to protest and ways that are very damning and damaging to our country. Moving on, want to a lot to cover today. I'm going to jump to this. I'm going to try to go through this. And again, to be fair to Vice President Harris, I'm going to be using mainly left-leaning sources. And where does she stand on tax policy? Real answer, nobody knows. We're expecting her to follow Joe Biden's policies. But I guess, again, she's being closely watched to see what she can do. She'll probably follow the things similar to the Biden proposal. But if you look at her policy positions when she was running for president, there's going to be some tweaks. And again, she'll be largely on board with most of what Biden has been pushing, especially in the big picture, but there are going to be tweaks here. If she uses the Biden staff, campaign infrastructure and staff, she might be kind of forced to do that, follow that in her campaign. But the real question is, how would she govern? Main thing, expiring Trump tax cuts. She wants most of those to expire, but not raise taxes on those making less than $400,000. The problem is, there's plenty of small business owners making $400,000 or more. But the way things are changing with the IRS, which I'm really hoping to get to, it's going to have huge consequences and is having huge consequences for all kinds of small business owners. They say that they don't want to raise taxes for people making less than $400,000. They have definitely turned the IRS on and are pursuing people, all kinds of Americans, regardless of their income. And that's what I really want to talk about today. So One of her things is proposals in in her 2020 campaign was to increase the refundable tax credit. It was $2,000 prior to the Trump tax cuts. They increased it to $3,000, and now Harris was suggesting back then to raise it to $6,000, so roughly $500 a month. That could really help the poorest in America. And the problem is the tax bill for that. I'm trying to see exactly where it's at. I think it's in one of the later articles. To do this, it's estimated to cost $3 trillion. So the problem is every time you want to give money away or help people out, it costs and it adds to the budget. So sometimes it's like 30 billion a year. 3 trillion over 10 years would be roughly 300 billion a year. So again, the problem is, when do we stop adding fuel to the fire and just spending ourselves into oblivion? So there's another article from Punchbowl News, again a left-leaning site. Again, the Democrats want her to stick with that. They want to pretty much, if it ain't broke, she's got 110 days. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just go with what they already have in place, is what they're encouraging her to do. And so that's really going to be their focus campaign, winning a tax fight for middle class of families and kids. So the problem with that is, when you focus on soaking the rich for middle class, people that aren't paying taxes, not saying that they don't need help, especially families with kids, it can really hurt the economy and it can hurt the budget. So last article here on some ideas from Kamala Harris. This is really looking back at her 2020 White House bid and where did she stand. In general, she stood to the left, President Biden, and sometimes to the left of even Bernie Sanders. So it really depended where she was. One of her big proposals was broadening health insurance coverage. So essentially she wanted a government-backed health insurance system, but then stop short of completely eliminating private insurance. So people could still have private insurance, but making government-backed health insurance available to everyone. Again, there would be costs. So the problem is affording it, and that's the problem, is that most of the middle class can't afford the cost of insurance because it's so expensive. So either you dramatically reduce the cost by offering more and more subsidies, which increases the government burden for this. That's the problem with the one size fits all. Bernie Sanders wanted a Medicare for All plan, which would she actually co-sponsored while in the Senate, and it would eliminate private health insurance. And her plan was to do a Medicare for All type system over 10 years. So that would allow private insurance to offer Medicare plans or supplementary plans, but it would essentially get rid of private insurance in most forms for average individuals. So how would she pay for it? Taxing Wall Street trades and transactions, changing the taxation of offshore corporate income, so increasing taxes on the wealthy. The problem with increasing taxes on the wealthy is those things do trickle down. We're not, nobody's an island, no man is an island, and it does have an impact. The wealthy will take their money and go somewhere else. They don't have to play here in the United States. And so it's not just a one size fit all. When you make these policies, it does affect others. And that would be through beefing up federal premium subsidies. I'm not going to go through some of these abortion stance. Most people know where I mean, the current stance of the Democrat Party is pretty much abortion on demand up to birth. So, not going to dive into that. But again, providing middle class tax relief. So again, this is the main thing: the $6,000 a year. Here it is. It's estimated cost $3 trillion over 10 years, and this is coming from CNN. So, and unlike a typical tax credit, this money would go directly to people, regardless if they owed taxes or owed other things. So it would be money directly in the pockets of some of the poorest. But the problem is, if you just throw money out there, that can just lead to more inflation. So again, she wants to raise the corporate tax rate to 35%. Biden suggested raising it to 28% if the Trump tax cuts expire. And so that's really what they're focusing on as far as tax policy. So I want to jump to the topic of the day. Where are we going? What to expect from a Harris presidency? This is really what we should be doing as Americans, is talking about the issues. And I see all kinds of people say, I'm with her, I'm with Kamala Harris. Great. Why? Why are you with her? Why are you supporting her? What stances do you agree with? And so as people can say, look, I understand the policies, I understand what they're supporting, and I support that. Okay, fine, that's great. And we should be discussing the issues of the day. Now, maybe I'm too idealistic, who knows? Well, I'll jump to an IRS article. This came out today, today, this morning, July 25th. So this highlights what the IRS has been doing, and I'm going to give the IRS kudos here. I trash the IRS a lot. It's too easy. But they do have a lot of positive changes here online. Now, the one thing that drives people away from this is you have to do a face scan. You have to provide all your personal information. It is very intrusive to set up an online account, and especially people that aren't familiar or comfortable with computers are being left out here. But what can you do? And as a tax professional, I had to do it. I mean, if I'm going to represent my clients, again, I didn't have much of a choice. So I did it begrudgingly. But it is important for people to know what's there. So again, they have made it easier. And I think that's a good thing. The more that they put information in the hands of taxpayers, they can make decisions, informed decisions, see what's going on. There's plenty of times that we help people that just don't have a clue what's going on. And if they had access to an online account or could use that, they could get some of the information themselves. And I think making things easier for taxpayers overall is a positive, a huge positive. So you can get wage and income account transcripts, which tells you it's a yearly statement that shows what was reported to the IRS each year. Record of account, which has your account transcripts. It shows all the positive and negatives on your account. And return transcripts. So it shows your tax returns, and they only have those for the last 3 years, though. You can request to update a PIN or a PIN number with the IRS using smartphones or tablets. So they're trying to make it so people can access and use their smartphones. There's plenty of people today that don't even have a computer. They just have a tablet, etc. My concern there is the more that available to make it to smartphone devices or tablets, it might lead to more identity theft. And we really don't want people's identities stolen as far as when it comes to their online accounts. They can look at the status of an audit, which is very handy. And sometimes as a tax professional, I don't have access to that. So I would suggest one of the things, and I'm going to get to this, one of the changes I think they should do is allow representative power of attorneys access to this information as well. And I get plenty of clients who are like, well, I was able to get this information. You're my power of attorney. Don't you get this information before me? No, not necessarily. And the way the IRS is going, sometimes they make it harder. We're up against a break. I'm going to have to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hubert Johnson here. Thank you for staying with us through the break. So I get a little excited sometimes when I go, I start digging into this. So just real quick review. I went over a little bit last time. You can get transcripts online. You can modify your PIN even on smartphones and tablets. You can check out the status for your audit instead of having to call the IRS. And calling the IRS to get an update on the audit is a huge pain. It is difficult to do and very time consuming. You can do a lien payoff calculator to access lien information and see how to get rid of liens or generate a letter to download and print it, which is very handy, especially if you're buying or selling. If you're trying to sell property, if you have a tax lien, the ability to do that can be very helpful. You can complete the pending installment agreement process online, which is you're setting up an installment agreement to pay the balance in full. They'll tell you how much you can pay, and if you just have a simple case, you can just do that online. I think that's great that they're making simple cases a lot easier to handle. And then you can get an overview of their account information, status of tax refunds as they're being processed. And then they're trying to expand their business tax accounts and make it so you can file amended returns electronically, whereas they used to always have to be filed in paper form. This means that they can get processed a lot quicker. They have sent out notices that you have a notice. Please respond to this. And then they're trying to make this mobile, adaptive, and more useful. So again, some great improvements here. My big takeaway and my concern is that what this does is cuts out the representatives. People have a right to be represented and know their rights and options. But when you go straight to the online form, the only thing you can do is set up a payment plan to pay them in full. Now, it doesn't tell you if tax debts are about to expire. It doesn't tell you why a balance might be, a monthly payment might be so high. If you can't afford to make those payments, there's no options. But when you call into the IRS, that's the first thing tell you is like, you have to make this payments, you have to do this. So again, we talked about how you really don't want to be lying to the IRS. Bad idea. They will lie to your face. And I say that because they make statements like that all the time. When I call them the IRS and they don't know I'm a power of attorney, they make statements like that to me all the time. And the moment I say I'm the power of attorney, whoop, things change. And it's not everybody at the IRS, but I hear it and I have heard it over the years, and it's gotten so much worse where the first thing they tell you is you have to pay it in full, you have to pay it by the deadline. IRS is demanding every single penny. That's a huge violation of your rights. The right to be informed, the right to know your options, and to be able to make informed decisions. So this is why I do recommend, highly recommend, before you just go and pay the IRS, call, get a free consultation, and get an idea of what your rights and options are. I can't tell you how many times I've had someone call me to hire me, and they said, look, we called the IRS, we were told we had to set up this payment. We can't afford it. And sometimes it's little old ladies living on Social Security and like, this is all I have. I can't afford to pay this, make this payment, but they told me I had to do it. And so the IRS, more and more are using high pressure tactics to force individuals and make them feel like they have to do this, or they're going to get levied, they're going to get garnished. And then when I ask them, and again, this is me being, I am sarcastic at heart, very sarcastic. I'll just play along with them like, well, what if I can't afford to pay? Oh, well, if you can't afford to pay, you have to go through this long process and provide financial information that goes through all aspects of your financial situation. I'm like, oh, you mean a non-collectible status? Yeah, I have the information ready to go. And they're like, oh, okay. And you can sit there and go over it with them on the phone. The problem is the IRS has made it pretty difficult, where it's just not based on your finances. It's based on their allowables and what they will allow per category. So whether or not you qualify is a different thing. And even then, when someone clearly qualified for a hardship status, I've seen the IRS set up installment agreements that they couldn't afford to pay, or that they were struggling and robbing Peter to pay Paul to pay this installment agreement when legally they don't have to. That's my biggest problem with the IRS. It's harder to get your rights respected. It's harder to make sure that you're qualifying for the options that you actually do qualify for. And one thing that kills me with the IRS, and the states will do this too, if it's a difficult call and someone really just, if you're bawling and you're just frustrated and you're sharing your emotions with the IRS, and they're not sure how to help you, they'll just tell you, look, you either have to pay or you can go file an offer in compromise. And they'll just throw that out there to get someone get a difficult call off the line, rather than trying to actually help them. The offer in compromise program is harder now than it's ever been. Like, I shouldn't say that. Harder than it's been in the last 20 years. The reason why is this administration has made a concerted effort to make it harder. I'm going to stop sharing. This is what a normal offer and compromise process is like. First of all, you have to call and you have to make sure your tax returns are squared away, you don't have any issues, and you have to make sure that you are fully compliant with the current year, 2024, that you're not that you're not going to owe for 2024. If the IRS thinks or suspects in any way, shape, or form that you might owe for the current year, they're going to reject your offer like that. So when you submit your offer, you have to have the documents together, you have to have everything put together. And when you submit it, almost on every single case is getting rejected. Why? You need to file a return. Most of the time it's a return that they didn't have any income for. You have to pay estimated tax payments. You don't have sufficient withholdings. So they're going after people and saying you have to do A, B, and C. A lot of times it's wrong. But it doesn't matter what the reason is. The IRS is finding some way to reject every single offer. Now, the crazy part about this is you just have to call them and communicate to them and say, look, this is why I don't have to pay this, or this is why I can't afford to make estimate tax payments. My income's gone down. This is what it is this year. But getting a hold of them is harder than ever. They have two major centers, New York and Holtzfield, and then you have Memphis, Tennessee. We can still get through most of the time to New York. It's always been a little more difficult to get through the offer and compromise unit. You can't call the main IRS lines because they're unavailable. But you need to call either New York or Memphis depending on what your case is. It's gotten so bad that most of the time we can't get through to Memphis, which means we're just sending in faxes, we're mailing in responses, and they have very tight deadlines, 2 weeks, 10 days. And so you have to send these in right away. You have to make sure they've received them, but it's harder than ever to actually talk to someone. So when they reject your case initially, it's not even in the hands of an offer examiner yet. This is someone just sending up, finding reasons to reject pretty much every single offer is what we're seeing now. And if you don't reply, your offer's done. So you have to be on top of it. You have to be the squeaky wheel. You have to be beating the IRS like a bongo drum saying, I'm here, I'm responding. True story, and I've shared this before. We got one of these, we're getting letters like this all the time because we're submitting offers regularly. And I called in, couldn't get through to them, finally got through to the main line. I said, look, I've been calling and leaving all kinds of messages. I faxed a response, and I was told previously, just fax in a response, and they'll get it. So I faxed in the response. I have a fax confirmation letter proving that they received a response. And the IRS representative told me, no, you have to mail it in. So first of all, be very cautious about what's going on there. Don't believe them when they tell you something. Things are changing all the time at the IRS, especially lately, usually for the worse. When you're told something, take it with a grain of salt. Do what they're advising you to do, but still be redundant. Redundancy is your friend. You want to call, you want to fax, you want to mail proof, and keep proof that you've sent all of these. So when they do still reject it, you can call and demand a manager and raise some holy hell. That is what we're seeing that we're having to do on most of these cases because they're almost impossible to get through to. The best time to call is first thing in the morning, later on the week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Don't try to call on a Monday or Tuesday when you can, and try to call throughout the day, but usually throughout the day, their service has gotten so bad that their lines are backed up and you usually can't get through it all. So again, how does the average person deal with this? It's nuts. It really is. When it's this hard for tax professionals to deal with the IRS and continue to move offers along, it is a huge problem today. And we've actually resorted to filing what's called a TIGTA report. So TIGTA. So this is a way to hold the IRS accountable and file a formal complaint. So if someone tells you ridiculous information or they reject your offer, don't even give you a chance, you can and should be filing TIGTA reports. And this is to hold the IRS accountable and individuals and say, look, this is how they messed up my case. They didn't treat me fairly. They didn't follow the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. And that gets reported, and it sticks on their record, on their career. So it's a black mark on their career. Now, I highly recommend calling your representative in Congress and calling your senator. When they start hearing a flood of complaints, that's when Congress usually starts taking notice and saying, hey, it's hurting average day Americans. My constituents are upset. We need to do something here. These are just a few of the many ways that the IRS has become more and more difficult when you call in. If you talk to one line, they can't resolve your case. They have to send you somewhere else, but where they send it to you, they can't give you transcripts. So they have to send you back, and they've created 2 or 3 additional levels of bureaucracy within collections. It's a mess. So this is why, if you're doing anything other than a simple installment agreement, I hate to say it now, but we try to encourage people, get informed, educate yourselves. But unless you're a tax professional, it's getting harder and harder to get things done with the IRS, and it shouldn't be like that. Absolutely shouldn't be like that. So, again, if you have questions, give us a call, 520-485-7371. Again, we don't charge for the initial consultation, and there's plenty of times we give people free advice, send them on their way. So I sat down with someone yesterday. We can either do it over phone, by Zoom, or in person. But we were sitting down, and we've been talking to them for a while, and they decided to finally hire us. And they brought in their pay stubs, and I looked over their pay stubs. I'm like, based on this, you don't qualify. And they brought in some new information. I'm like, okay, well, based on this new information you hadn't shared with us before. But again, you should have a thorough interview. And because based on the new information, they did qualify, and we were able to help them out. So again, it's and understand long-term what's happening at the IRS. It's not going to be a swift pivot come January 1st, no matter what happens with the election. I don't think Vice President Harris is going to change anything that's currently happening with the IRS. So if you have concerns, you feel like you're getting run over roughshod, give us a call. There are free legal tax clinics if you don't think you can afford a professional tax company. So there are ways, more than one ways, to go over your rights, your options, and we'll talk to anybody and steer them in the right direction. Again, that's part of the give back to the community that we try to do. And you can call us directly, or you can find these episodes and previous episodes on our website at guardiantaxlaw.com. You go to that website, and there's a YouTube link right at the top of the page. You can click through those and go through our YouTube channel and find past episodes and get free information that way. So again, it's our goal is to help people, is really to make this easier for people, make dealing with the IRS and taxes easier. It's not just a name; it actually means something to us. To try to make taxes easier for individuals, to explain how to work with the IRS and still get your case resolved for you and your family. So again, have a wonderful Wednesday, or today's Thursday, as we get ready for the weekend. The week's catching up to me. And we'll continue to talk about what's happening and the tax policy considerations from both parties. So have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow, bright and early, and then getting ready for the weekend.